right, this is Bill again, and we are at the 2011 AltCar Expo in Santa Monica, and now I have the opportunity and privilege of talking to Martin Schuermann. Martin is the CEO of Vision Motorcorp, and we are sitting way high up off the exhibit floor in a Freightliner that is equipped to run on fuel cell. That's what we're going to talk about. So, Martin, first of all, thank you for taking the time with us here, and thank you for the effort of putting this rig together. This is beautiful. So let's talk about it. Why a fuel cell in a big, heavy, what is this, Class 7, Class 8
This is a Class
rig?
8 truck.
Class 8 truck. Why a fuel cell?
Well, fuel cell, first of all, has no emissions and makes electricity. So that's the perfect solution to have a car, an electric truck, running and giving it a range that is acceptable to the industry, which batteries alone wouldn't be able to do in this class.
Right. Now, so what this truck is not, most people are going to be familiar with the big, heavy, over-the-road rigs with the big 52-foot trailers being pulled behind them. This is that class of vehicle, but this particular type of vehicle is actually used in a more limited range function, doing what's called drayage, and maybe explain that a little bit.
Well, drayage, this truck was designed to do exactly that drayage work, which is usually done in and around ports, rail yards, large distribution centers, where these trucks deliver through highly populated areas, like we're here in the LA basin. You have more than 10 million people sharing this space, and you have about 30,000 trucks moving goods in and around these ports.
And pretty much all of them diesel.
Pretty much diesel. Some of them are now LNG, but
gas,
they're all internal combustion engines, so they're still all burning fossil fuels and putting out emissions. So this truck now is designed to do exactly the same thing, moving the big containers up to 80,000 pounds, picking them up from the dock and taking them to the rail yards or to distribution centers here in Los Angeles.
Now, give us a little bit of background on the history of the company itself. When did you guys get into this?
We started in about 2008, and we started with developing drivetrains for heavy-duty vehicles. We actually started, believe it or not, with an electric Hummer.
Okay.
And just to test different battery systems, and
right.
And once we felt familiar with that, we then actually started in end of 2008 to acquire the first Freightliner Columbia as our what we call T1, a prototype truck that we put the drivetrain in, the batteries, and actually it started running in April 2009, and we started testing about the ability of these trucks with the Siemens motors that we're using to pull the weight and to also get the decent range with the hydrogen fuel cells on board.
Let's talk about the fuel cells then. Give us a little bit of what are sort of the technical specs of this vehicle. How big is the fuel cell? What's the range of the vehicle? Right. Some of those things.
The standard truck carries about 20 kilograms of hydrogen, 40 pounds.
And that's here in behind this.
That's behind here in the box.
In the box, the cab
exactly.
Box. So.
And it has a 30 kilowatt hydrogen fuel cell, and it has a 150 kilowatt hour lithium-ion battery pack.
Okay.
So the motor takes its energy out of the 150 kilowatt hour lithium-ion battery pack, and the fuel cells kind of keep that pack always charged.
Okay.
So the idea was, because fuel cells are still fairly expensive, to create a system where it gets enough power delivered to the motor for peak consumptions, but not having to size the fuel cell to an unaffordable size of. Let me give you an example.
Right.
This truck, when it pulls a container and it goes down the freeway at 55 miles an hour, consumes about 160 kilowatts. And so the battery pack has no problem delivering that power to the motor. However, if you wanted to propel this vehicle with the fuel cell alone, you would have to have a 150, 160 kilowatt fuel cell.
So 5 times what's on it now.
Exactly. And that would be 5 times the price.
Right.
And at that point, you are no longer competitive in the market. And trucking business is a competitive business.
Right.
So we wanted to create a system that can actually do what is necessary in the truck, in the drayage application, and being competitive with the diesel and the natural gas trucks.
So what's a vehicle like this? What's its typical work day look like in terms of the distance it carries? So is that 20 kilograms of hydrogen behind us here, is that enough for just that day, or will it go a week, or what's the typical profile?
It's, you know, the typical trucker in the drayage application down in the port does about 150 miles or less a day.
Okay.
So if he fuels up once a day, you know, he's fine, and that's not a problem. You know, on their way to work or on their way back from work, they'll fuel up in the port with the hydrogen, and so that's not a problem. They don't have to do it multiple times.
Okay.
They don't have to plug in for recharging or anything like that. So the typical duty cycle is the truckers take their truck, they get into the gates of the port, which sometimes can mean an hour and a half of waiting time. So our trucker sits in the cab, no vibration, no noise, and he's got his radio and the air conditioning
right.
on, whereby, you know, his colleagues are having their diesel engines or natural gas engine idling away,
right.
and spewing that emission up in the air. And that's basically what made us think of this, you know, the immense idling time that's happening in these drayage applications is just such a waste of energy.
How did you identify that market? I mean, you were working on this Hummer, but obviously that Hummer wasn't developed for the drayage market.
No.
So when did you sort of identify that?
We looked into the heavy-duty market, and obviously living in LA, truck traffic is one of the, I think it is the single biggest source of particulate emission in the LA basin. So you read it in the press, you hear it on the radio, you hear it in the news. So we had this technology that we were developing, and we were saying, well, if it works in a Hummer, can we scale this up, and can it work in a Class A truck?
Right.
And together with Siemens as our technology partner, we came up with this drivetrain, which can actually do more than a diesel. It has about twice the torque.
Okay.
So the truckers love this, because this is really
that's what I was going to put. My next question to ask you is what do the drivers think of this, and how many do you just have the one vehicle running down in the port at the moment, or?
We have this one as an active test running in the port. We're delivering a second one to the port of Los Angeles in a few weeks.
So this one's in Long Beach.
Long Beach and LA.
Oh, in LA, so it operates.
Both, it's one port complex, so there's no like fence going in the middle.
Right. Okay.
So this one runs down there and does the typical duty cycles of the port drayage, and then we are delivering one to the port of Los Angeles directly, which will transport. Well, we actually will pull what they call a transporter. It's an educational 50-foot trailer that they carry around California for conventions, schools, universities, to show the green initiatives of the port.
Right.
And traditionally, this thing was pulled actually with an LNG truck, and they figured, well, if we talk about green initiatives, I think the transporter should be actually pulled with a hydrogen zero emission truck. Okay. And the nice byproduct was too, they usually when they stop that transporter, they have to run diesel generators, to provide the power for
the trailer.
But actually, when this truck, when it stops, it is a generator, because you've got a 33 kilowatt fuel cell sitting there that can pull out that power. So, it's a nice little byproduct for them that they.
So the vehicle's actually, that particular vehicle is actually designed to be if you will, a mobile plus stationary.
Absolutely.
Power plant.
Yeah, and that was is getting twice the hydrogen fuel cell power than the traditional model that we're building, because they wanted the additional standing power.
Okay.
And so they're actually operating with a 66 kilowatt fuel cell system.
Right. Well, let's talk about durability and some of those issues. Typically one of the issues, besides cost and other things with fuel cells, has been the durability of the stack itself.
Right.
And so I think we had been talking earlier that the typical life cycle before it needs a major overhaul of a truck like this is about 8 years.
Right.
So are you sort of envisioning that the stack will be able to deliver that kind of
Yeah, the stack's designed for 10,000 hours.
Okay.
Which should translate into about that 8-year period of time that the diesel drivers are used to. The motors don't need any service, really. I mean, you can drive them 1 million miles and then you change your bearings. So the real maintenance item on this truck is the air intake filter for the fuel cells.
Okay.
That is the only thing that you have to watch as a driver. There is no, the brake pads last forever because you brake with your regen brakes, which means you brake with your motor rather than your brake pads.
Right.
And you capture that energy and send it back into the battery pack.
Right.
And then, you know, you don't need oil changes. You don't have an emission system, so you don't have to service that,
right? Which
can be very costly nowadays. So, you know, there is, as I said, there's the air filters are the only maintenance items on these
Yeah,
trucks.
you start talking about the certification and things. I mean, that's one of the issues. When you took this vehicle in, or I assume you've had to take this vehicle into some type of certification, what are they seeing? You know, they're used to having diesels come through there, and here's a vehicle that comes through that...
Well, there are no standards yet.
Okay.
So, you know, we're still running basically under an executive order.
Okay.
And so, you know, we are actually creating the standards for hydrogen zero-emission trucks.
Somebody is wanting to get a ride.
Hey, I wanted to say congratulations on your company. It
Thank
looks
you.
really good.
All right, thank you very
You're
much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Good for her.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, we'll wrap it up here then. So where you've got this truck in operation, you're building another one for the port for the educational unit.
Right. We have another prototype, you know, in the shop for testing.
Okay.
And then we're now getting ready to deliver manufacture and deliver the first 100 trucks for the company that's actually testing this.
Okay. Good. So economics. If they're going to order 100 of these, there must be they see some economics. So let's wrap up by having you maybe talk about what you see are the economic advantages of this.
Well, it's half the operating costs.
Okay.
One is because the hydrogen down in the port is fairly inexpensive.
Okay.
We are building the first permanent refueling station in the port for the trucks, and so we can provide a diesel equivalent hydrogen, which is about a pound of hydrogen, that gets you about as far, actually gets a little further than a gallon of diesel gets these diesel trucks.
Okay.
And that costs you around $225 to $250.
Okay, about half of what?
Well, it's a little more than half, but then
half,
you know, giving the maintenance costs that you're saving, your operating costs are coming in at about half of what you're used to right now. So that more than makes up for the initial sticker shock of these trucks.
Which is
$270,000 for the
and how does that compare with the drayage companies if they go off and buy a brand new Freightliner like this?
If you buy a brand new, you know, Freightliner, this model with a diesel engine, you know, sized diesel engine is about $140,000.
Okay.
Natural gas truck with the big engine costs you about $200,000. So, you know, we're more than that, but we have some incentives from the federal government. There's a federal tax credit of $40,000, and then there's some state incentives that may or may not be there when the truckers apply for it. But you know, we're figuring between, you know, $20,000 and $40,000 from the state that truckers can, you know, tap into.
Okay.
But then really, you know, your residual value should be higher on these trucks. So, you know, we are creating a leasing arm as well from Vision. And so hopefully we can provide attractive lease payments for the truckers. So really on a monthly basis, this shouldn't be more expensive than a diesel or natural gas truck.
Other ports you're looking at besides Long Beach and LA?
Absolutely. I mean, basically every single deep water port in the country is a candidate for this truck.
Okay, good. And I think the lights are telling us it's time to wrap it up. Martin, thank you.
All right.
Okay.